Good morning, Yorkshire Classic Cars Ltd fans, and welcome yet again to another sunny day in Retford. Well, it's kind of overcast, but they usually end up sunny. Welcome back to the Anglia. Today, I'm going to do the other side wheel arch. I've shown you this wheel arch before. I've basically sectioned it and made it longer, and I thought I'd just show you the process involved. You can see the inner is now all painted up. I've done some other work on the car as well. Repaired this section here, removed that section from it. Beautiful little repair somebody's done there. Pulled it all out, but not welded up the hole. Anywho, I digress. So what I'm going to do is crack on with showing you how I mark out and approach this task. I'm not saying this is the only way to do it. I'm certainly not saying it's the best way to do it. I'm just going to tell you this is how I do it. It worked really well on the other side. Obviously, I've got a wing to cut sections out of. And it's one of those jobs that I always worry about a little bit because they're quite difficult jobs to do. But to get it right and get it nice and neat, I'll just show you what I do. Okie dokie, bear with. So you should have seen there, obviously, me cleaning the paint and filler off this section where I need to weld. So yeah, I could do this after, by all means, but it just makes it a lot easier if the wing is solid when you do it. As you can see, these are absolutely rust-free wings. No rust, no rot, nothing. Solid as a rock, absolutely. So luckily, there's no rust repairs at all on here, and they are nice and straight. Ish. You'll see here there's quite a thickness of filler. Here and here, significantly less than on the other side. I've cleaned off more than I should need to use because I'm going to cut across, obviously in the centre of the arch here, and across here, and down here. The reason I clean off more is just so basically it's harder to do once you've started sectioning it. If I cut here and this is all flapping about, there's a chance of damaging it. And the straighter I can keep it, the better. There are some ripples in the wing. You can't see them when it's like this in bare metal, but you can feel them a little bit. To clean this off, I use these. I'm actually quite low on these. I get them off Amazon. It's not an advert for Amazon by any means. You can get them other places. They are really, really good. They take paint and filler and stuff off really, really quickly down to the bare metal, but they don't damage the surface. If you use a flat disc or a sanding disc, you are removing a lot of metal. You see a lot of sparks. The only thing you need to be careful with these is if you run up onto the edge, that's like a cutting disc, and it will leave little nicks in it, which you can see there, a few little tiny nicks in the paint, in the metal, but they're not deep nicks. It's not taking tons out, you know. For the corners and edges, I use a wire wheel in here to let me into there. You can do the whole panel with the wire wheel. It does it perfectly well, but it just takes longer, that's all. You'll also notice I've dodged from here to here to here to here, and then I keep checking just to check how warm the panel is getting because I don't want to distort it. In thick areas of filler like these, I'll tend to do a bit of a pass and then go do something else and then a bit more and then come back to it just to let the heat dissipate a little bit. You kind of get used to it. It's not... There's no sort of skill involved. It's just using a bit of caution, really. Chances are it doesn't get warm enough to distort the panel, but I'd rather be careful. So, what I've done there off camera, let me zoom you out a little. So, I've covered it in tape, as you saw. And then what I've done is, these are just some, I think the joist ties. I've found them somewhere, I don't even know, but they are a straight edge. So what I do is I line that up with the centre of the swage line all the way down. Now that remains reasonably square to the rest of the car, but it certainly provides me with a straight edge, and it worked on the other side. And if it worked on the other side, it worked on this side. I've marked the centre of the wheel arch there or thereabouts and put a 90-degree line down with a engineer square, tri-square. Now, as you can see, that is really difficult, because as you do that, the line jiggles about and you can't keep it square to your work or anything like that. So that takes a little bit of work and a little bit of care when you do the welding, when you do the cut. But that's a shortcut, so as long as I start roughly square, that will end up square because the blades are flat. The most difficult part to mark out is this section at the front. As you can see, if you put a straight edge down, it curves away there at the bottom, and if I step you back a little, you should be able to see that that line is off square at the bottom. It's a bit of a pain, really. You kind of have to do it by good luck and very, very careful cutting disc cuts down here with the 1mm slitting disc. So what I'll do next is I'll cut that out. Now on this occasion, on the other side, I didn't do this, but on this side I've decided just to Tack screw the steel piece as a guide so I can cut along the edge of that with my cutting disc. Just keeps it nice and square and straight, because obviously I'm going to move in a parallel line to that straight forward. So the neater and square I can get it. I don't want the cut to be all jiggly wobbly, because obviously then I've got to fill it with weld, and that is really difficult. And it makes a messy job, and it distorts the panel more, and so on and so forth. So I need to cut along there as neatly as I can. Now this, I do put a small swage on there, which I'll show you in a minute, but that does allow for any slight discontinuation there, but it strengthens up the panel. Because obviously when I'm grinding back and thinning it down, I don't want all this to end up wiggly wobbly, because if it vibrates, it's going to crack. If it cracks, it's going to ruin the paint and the wing and everything. So anyway, that's my thinking on it. Off we go. So, as you can see now, I've done that cut. I'm not going to run my fingers down it because it is a fresh cut. As you can probably see there is still a heck of a burr down the edge of that. That then allows that, as you can see, it was there. It can now flow along there nice and neatly. The 1mm cutting disc will allow for a 1mm gap, so for full weld penetration across that. And I can now move that relative to that line. That is now my reference line. Obviously, I'm going to deburr the back of each panel and the fronts and everything, and clean all that up just with a one of those scurfy pads, not with a flapper disc. And I'm going to move that forwards around 30mm just to match the other side. I shall mark down this edge here. I don't know if you can see that from my hand, down this edge here, and then I'll trim it down, put a small swage in, and then trim the edge off that swage, because I only want about 1 millimetre or 2 of overlap there. And then so, sorry, I haven't put the microphone on for this, so I'll put my face close and shout a little bit. As you can see there, I've marked that, so we kept that frame level. I've moved it forward. You'll see me nip to the other side of the car. The reason I did that was to measure between where the curve is here to the rear of the arch, nice and square, just to make sure we're within tolerance. It's absolutely dead on to that line. So what I'm going to do now, obviously I'll just put it in a high-speed number. But what I'll do now is I will mark back. I use the edge setting tool on this. So what I need to do is mark back 1/2 inch all the way down. That will edge set down that line. And then what I can do with that, the bottom section here will stay flush. Always keep that a butt weld, the last sort of inch or so there. And then this part here, I'll put the swage in, and then I shall trim all the way down all the way down with the angle grinder. So there's just the merest overlap there, just to provide a little bit more strength, take some of this wibbly wobbliness out. Now it's not bad here, it really isn't, but the bottom corner, if you look there, it does wibbly wobbly a little bit. Then there's a little bit of cleaning up on the back, because obviously this is under sealed. So I clean all that off so as I can get some welds on the back, and do the same on here. that's under sealed on the back as well. So I'll clean all that off, and then yeah, it's weldy. So you saw me cut and swage that, all right? So you can see there's a very light swage down there. Obviously, this is the only thing holding it on and the magnet behind. So it's not lined up at all yet, although the fit is actually very, very good. It's a little tight here, obviously, for good weld penetration. What about a millimetre there? Which is why I use panel clamps on there, and I'll use those right across. They are a literal nightmare to set up. If there was like 3 of you holding it, it'd probably make life an awful lot easier, but there isn't, there's just me. So I will now, I know where to trim the back of that. I'll just take about, I'll leave about 3mm down from the edge here. And that is absolutely bang on level with the other side. And I'm really, really pleased with that. So I'll just take that. So hopefully you can see there, I've got this set up. The gap is correct here. I've used these panel clamps. I like these. They keep a nice flush surface there, or certainly as flush as you can get it, I would suggest. The only thing I can't get to clamp is here. I don't have clamps large enough for that. So what I will do before I start is using a scraper chisel, to be honest. I will ease that in. Now I use quite a broad-headed chisel so I can make sure that is at least flat. And I will put a spot weld here, here, and then this should probably be pulled in by then anyway. So I'll just nip a couple of spots in there. And then I'm going to spot weld across there. When it comes to the welding, I tend to try and get the panel tacked up slowly, and then that allows you to let the panel cool as you're going along. So I'll probably do, as I say, a spot weld here. Then I may do one over here, and then maybe one over here, and then one over here, and so on and so forth. Initially, these are going to be quite close together purely because I have to keep that panel pulled together. I could do with some wider mouth clamps, but whenever I order them, they tend to be really rubbish. So I'm just kind of stuck with what I've got at the minute, but So, having literally just finished that, it is still warm in places. I'm going to let that cool now. I spotted about every 2 inches down here. I hope you could see that. Checking that that's nice and smooth now, that's lovely. Obviously, you don't want to find out once you've welded all this up fully, 100% welded, that something isn't quite right. Yes, you can fix things afterwards, but it's a blooming sight quicker to do them right the first time. So if you look right down to there now, that, I don't really like that. It is square and flat. So the fit is perfect, but I'd just like a little bit more gap there. So I may actually just put the angle grinder disc through that, just to open up that gap. That's good, that's good. It is in the right place, but we might just want to ease that ever so slightly, just to allow a bit of better weld. This is where the overlap is, there. That fits lovely now across there. And what I've done is, with the welding clamps, I've tried to just put a zip right next to each clamp, and in some cases, on the clamp. Nope. So what I'll do is, It's quite difficult to weld between the clamps, but now it's got it, I might just put another sort of tack in between each of those. So there's one about every sort of ½ inch or so. And then one between each of these slowly. This is the part, if you're doing this yourself, or if you're watching this to do it yourself, this is the part where you really need to take your time. This is still warm. There's still transient heat in it, and I want that to be stone cold. All this up here. So, there's the wing partially welded in. What I'll do is I'll zoom in a little bit there so you can see. You should be able to see how you see the spots don't flow together. And yes, I would love to just go all the way along and get that to flow to make a lot less grinding off and stuff. You can see that I welded between around the clamps fully, and then that one's stuck in a little bit. These are purely stuck because it's just closed up as the gap, and that's how tight they are. It shows how it draws it together when you weld. However, you can see this part is now almost welded fully. There's a little bit there to catch up. There's a little bit here to catch. Obviously, I can't just go straight across there because otherwise it'll end up wiggly wobbly. This is all now almost done. I haven't videoed this part purely because it'd be the longest editing job ever, because it's taken me literally, gosh, 5 hours to get this much done. It's a very slow process, unfortunately. But what I do is right. So I didn't bother videoing the welding and the grinding. It's a bit dull and mundane, and if you've seen it once, you've seen it a million times. It's just a load of sparks. The thing was, I was going to do spot, walk away, let it cool. Spot. And quite honestly, it's taken about 7 hours, probably 6, 7 hours, something like that. I haven't had any dinner today. I've just been doing this all day. I've done other stuff in between, but nothing I intended doing, just sort of faffing about. Finished off the front grille and stuff as well to try and let this cool so I could come back to it and weld it without, well, with as little distortion as possible. You're always going to get distortion when you weld. I haven't done panel work with the TIG, but I can only imagine that's even worse because the heat generator is a little bit like oxyacetylene. However, the job is finished. It's ground back. I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. So there you go. There's the finished job. It's getting a bit dingy and dark outside, so I'll show you that quite quickly. As you can see, if I start down here on the corner, that's lined up beautifully there. This is the edge here. If you can see it or not, there it is. It's a nice smooth transition. There's still a tiny bit of a step there because this part here joins into that curve there. So this curves and radiuses away. It was just the best compromise and the best area I could choose to get it consistent, and that's it. So that's the seam there all the way up. Seam welded all the way around. This is not a spot thing. If you're in America, I don't understand. I've seen a few YouTube contributors and people like that, and they do a spot and a spot, grind it back, masticate and call it a day. I don't think that's adequate. Maybe people in this country do it, I don't know. Me, I like to make sure it's fully welded on so it becomes one fused piece of metal. And this is one piece. You can see there, that's where the seam was that I've seam welded. That looks like a pinhole. It was, but because I ground back already, I've welded it on the back. But yeah, that's come out really nicely. There is a tiny little bit of rippling in it. This is the section here that I've let in just to allow it, that I've cut from the wing. See that one? That's the other side, but that's the section I cut out and then trimmed to fit. And yeah, overall, I think that makes a nice finish on that. The shape of the wing, fender, whatever you call it in America, has transited into that, and it's kept that sort of egg shape. I don't know really what you'd call it, but the aesthetic is still the same. All it is it's just slightly longer, and I've tried to maintain that for the aesthetics. What it'll look like painted, I've no idea. This is the customer's recommendation and request, so I can only assume he's seen it done before, but I'm really pleased how that's come out. So I will shake a bit of primer on that tomorrow when I've ordered some. But yeah, overall that's come out really well. So I'll leave you there. If you've got this far, and I appreciate if you have, you're probably the only person who's got this far is the guy who owns the car. I'm not going to say his name. Please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't done so already. I do loads and loads and loads of this sort of work. A lot of Triumphs, a lot of Fords, a lot of everything really. Hopefully the next video will be the bonnet on the Spitfire if I ever get that back from the sandblaster. But all being well, that'll be back soon and that'll be done as well. And I'll video some of that, how I do that. But yeah, overall really pleased with that. So stay tuned. See you next time. Over and out.